Hello everyone and welcome to episode 5 in Ryan Laley Games Podcast. I'm Ryan Laley and joining me this week is Billy Saunders. Say hello, Billy.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Stuck indoors.
Good. As we all are. This week we are talking about storytelling, and Bill is a good friend of mine who I've worked with in the past in games development and in media, and hopefully bring in his insight and experiences with storytelling in games, both as a media person as well as just a games player as well. So first of all, to start things off, storytelling is a very deep topic in all sense of the words, not just games. And what we're hoping to do today is just give a bit of insight into what kind of things you should be looking out for when designing a story for a game, what kind of things would make a good story, and what kind of narratives design can we take from, say, film, literature, going into games, and what kind of unique features of the medium can we use to make the storytelling better. So first things first, I think we should start off by talking about what do we feel storytelling can achieve in games. So what differences do we think? Well, what similarities do you think games have compared to, say, media and film? And what differences do they have in storytelling in media and film? So what have you got to say on the topic, Bill?
My kind of area that I teach is film, and obviously narrative is a key point of that. One of the things that we always focus on is the fact that storytelling is something that's ingrained in us. It helps us to understand and also to kind of break down what we see around us. It also helps us to teach lessons. It helps us to pass down history. So obviously, over thousands of years, this has gone from word of mouth to written words to artwork, through to television, film, and obviously through to games. And I think especially in the past decade, for sure, developing a narrative through games in particular has become its own art form in itself. And I think that it's something that I know for sure myself have started to focus on a lot more when I'm kind of picking and choosing what I want to play. I've stopped going for the typical online FPSs, and I'm looking more for a narrative that draws me in and something I could become emotionally invested in as well. Start to build up a relationship with the characters, and I think it much like you do in a film, you become more of an active spectator as opposed to someone that just takes it in and just takes whatever it's thrown at you as gospel. I think most recently I don't get to play a whole lot anymore, but Uncharted 4, for example, that whole story blew me away. It was like being part of the movie, and one I would quite happily watch again and again and again, but I find it takes a lot more energy to be a part of as well. It's quite nice to feel exhausted after playing a game. You don't get that from just watching a film or reading a book.
No. There is the argument as well with games such as like Uncharted, the Uncharted series in general, is the storytelling. It's becoming that line that blurs between film and game is getting more and more blurry, especially with certain games such as like the Uncharted series. Do you feel like that the game element is being lost a bit there, and do you feel like they could maybe make more use of the game sort of uniqueness of a game rather than relying on all these filmic tropes and all this use of cutscenes and high quality animations to tell that story? I haven't played Uncharted 4, so I'm going by your experience, but to me, from an outsider, it's a scary way to go, where you feel like you're more likely watching a story unfold rather than playing a story unfolding. I could be wrong. What's your take on it?
No, I agree. I think that a lot of games now do rely on pre-rendered cutscenes or quick time events. They tend to kind of bug me. I think quick time events can be quite a lazy way out of things. I know when they kind of reworked the Tomb Raider series, I forget the name of the one where she's on the island.
I think it was just called Tomb Raider.
Yeah, I think it probably was. That I felt like was just a lot of quick time events, a lot of button mashing, where, you know, the actual parts where it just kind of let you play the level out, and it felt very open, but they've done it in a way that actually it was quite linear. You know, you could only really go one way, but it felt like you had a choice. And those were the most engaging parts. Whereas, there's a lot of games that just kind of throw a whole ton of cutscenes at you, and, you know, not a lot really in between.
I find myself more attracted to stories which are told not just in like cutscenes and story minutes like that, but also the gameplay sort of complements the story in a really nice way, and it is, and they tend to come across as the stronger stories, the ones that are remembered for, or at least in my mind, are remembered for a long time. The most notable example I can think of in my head right now is Braid. Did you ever play Braid?
No, it's one of those ones that was always on the list.
Yeah. Well, sorry, I'm going to spoil Braid for you and everyone else, but it is like an ancient old game now, so you've had your chance. But Braid is if you have no idea what Braid is a platformer game where you can manipulate time to rewind it to go over your mistakes and make that jump a bit better, or get that past the enemy quicker, whatever it may be. And it's a puzzle game essentially, so you have to navigate through these levels, and each world has these sort of gimmicks and so forth. So one world may have little pockets where the closer you get to a black hole, the time slows down, the further away time speeds up. One, when you move right, time goes forward, when you move left it goes backwards, and so on and so forth. And the final world has time always reverses, okay? And you're throughout the game you're forever saying, I've got to go rescue the princess, It's not just very much like a Mario type thing. And you get to the end, and the final level is you at the bottom half of the screen is you, and at the top half of the screen is the princess, who is seemingly getting chased by this knight, and he's chasing her at the top while you're trying to catch up at the bottom, fighting enemies, getting through the levels, getting past traps and so forth. And you get right to the end, and it kind of flashes, and it reminds you, oh wait, by the way, this world you're in, don't forget, time goes backwards. So what you just experienced there, and you get to experience again in real time, like going forwards, that you're actually the one stalking her, and you're trying to catch her, and the knight is trying to save her. So you're causing all these little obstacles for the knight, and you're trying to stop the knight from reaching her, when in fact you're trying to catch her and separate her from the knight and so forth. And it's a really clever way of saying, like, look, the game mechanic here is telling the story, and it makes you go, oh snap, okay, geez, right. It makes you rethink that storytelling moment, and it's a really powerful moment, and those moments stick to you. There's one other great example, and one again, spoiler alert, it's Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, I think it's called, and this game, it is one of the few games which struck at me and just surprised me to no end. And it's a short game. It's about, I'd say, 4 hours long, and it's a simple game where you play two brothers and you're on one controller. So the left hand side of the controller controls one brother, the older one, and the younger brother's controlled on the right hand side of the controller. So you've got your sticks, each stick controls each brother, and the triggers are your sort of grab or interact or buttons. So you play the game, you're solving puzzles, getting past enemies and so forth. And the story is, again, spoiler alert, the older brother dies. And throughout the game, you've had to use you work together, the brothers, to sort of reach higher ledges. The younger brother can't swim, so the older brother has to like help him across the water, so you have to grab hold of each other, and so on and so forth. And at the end of the game, the older brother's died. You as a younger brother, just on your own, using half the controller only, get back to the start of the journey where you're aiming to go, and you wash up on the beach, and you're seemingly trapped because you as a younger brother can't get past this big body of water, and you approach the water, and the game does not tell you to do anything, but your instinct is, because you've been doing it the whole game, is to hold the older brother's interact button, even though he's dead and not there, to hold down his button whilst you're trying to get across water, and he is symbolically holding you up and holding you through the water, and he does that again. So when you come up to a higher ledge and you can't reach it again, if you hold down your older brother's buttons whilst you're trying to do it with the younger brother, your younger brother will suddenly be able to reach it. And it's this metaphor of like saying like your older brother's with you and he's helped you and he's still with you even though he has passed on, and you can and he's helping you progress and grow as a person. And it was a really strong, powerful moment, because again, the game doesn't tell you to push these buttons. You just have to figure it out and thinking like, wait, oh snap, okay. And it blows your mind. It's truly a powerful moment, and one I'll never ever forget. And that's what I really like. I really like it when gameplay supplements the storytelling and uses its mechanics in clever ways such as that. And these, granted, both two examples are sort of smaller indie games where they can experiment with storytelling, and I think you tend to see that a lot more. I think you get to see that experimental storytelling happening a lot more with indie titles, the smaller budget titles, than say the bigger ones, which is strange. You'd think, well, I guess it's not so strange, because I guess the big ones don't want to take as many risks, do they? I mean, it's just like big budget Hollywood films. We don't see Hollywood films taking massive risks with storytelling. We have to wait until we see the indie films and the foreign films come across and show us, oh, these are unique ways of telling stories and characters and so forth. So it's a shame that we don't see those big budget titles taking more risks with storytelling, but who knows, maybe we'll see more like that going forwards.
Yeah, I think it's kind of it's classically ingrained, isn't it, into any kind of creative industry. When Hollywood first started out, and it had its every film followed the same kind of rigid structure, and it weren't until they came up with a packet system that you could then go and start going for a specific style. And then obviously we had the new wave movement, and that developed the idea of the auteur, and I think you get that in game making as well. There are some developers out there that you recognise. I mean, I'd recognise a Naughty Dog game purely by how deep their narratives go. But I think what you were talking about with twists, narrative twists and stuff, I think the only thing is it's almost become expected now, that there is a twist in there. And that for me has started to become quite stale. It's when, like you were saying with that example you just gave, when the actual gameplay itself then gets quite twisted. There's the classic examples of, like, is it Psycho Mantis in Metal Gear Solid, where you have to swap the controller over into a different port. It's those little things that I think really are where games in general can develop a story a lot more than any other form of media can.
Definitely, yeah.
Because that's where you start to become actively part of that story.
Yeah, as you said, games have that unique quality of engaging with the player and getting the player to be part of the story and be interactive with that story. Again, with the example of Brothers, that, as I said, you can't move on until you figure that bit out. But once you figure that bit out, that metaphor, that theme, has then embedded itself into you, and you now know what the game's about, what it really is about. It's not just a beautiful, fun platformer puzzler. It's this story, this incredible story about two brothers who didn't always get on, but are, after all, are there for each other. And it's a really beautiful message. Thinking about those AAA games that not taking risks, I think there's only one I can think of that historically will take risks with storytelling, and I think that's Hideo Kojima with Metal Gear Solid, Death Stranding, and so forth. I think when you think of video game storytelling risks, I think he's up there for just the crazy ideas he has. Have you played Death Stranding at all, Bill?
No, but I kind of spoiled it for myself because after seeing all the marketing campaigns for it, I just wanted to know what it was actually about. So, and I've got to say, having read the story, having watched various gameplay videos, I mean, I think I've pretty much gone through most cutscenes from the game. I still haven't got a clue what that story is about. No. I think I can probably take a little bit of a guess, but I think that's key. I think that's why the gameplay element, it helps to stitch those components together. I don't think you should be able to tell a game story just by dipping into Wikipedia and some cutscenes on YouTube.
No. Well, especially because you think about games that are telling stories over tens of hours. Whereas if you try and ingest it all through Wikipedia in 30 minutes, it's not going to be the same experience, is it? Storytelling, that narrative device of time is super important, and it's how we, as you said right at the start, it's a learning experience. You're teaching the viewer, or the player in this case, themes, characters, motivations, things like that, over a time period, and you're drip feeding them that information as they go. And if you were to lump it all onto the player at the start, or in one lump sum, that impact is lost and that understanding is lost. So there's a lot of people who say, like, for example, won't play or haven't played Death Stranding or Metal Gear Solid games, that don't understand the story. But those who have played the games will tell you that they understand it fully. And I think the in the Hollywood version, I think that's the Matrix films in this case. Whereas if anyone who's reading a Wikipedia entry on what happens in Matrix 1, 2 and 3, it will just confuse the hell out of them. But if you were watching those films, it makes perfect sense. Well, I find it makes perfect sense anyway to myself. But I think that's the similarity between film and game, is that you've got the Matrix side of things and you've got the Hideo Kojima games type things, where they're both trying to usually hold a mirror up to current modern day civilization and make it reflect upon inside the medium. So you've got the Matrix, obviously, talking about how we're slaves to the machine and things like that, and then you've got Hideo Kojima's almost similar sort of thing, but slaves to like our genetics and machines and things like that. Two different narrative forms, but telling the same sort of thematic metaphors and themes. I think one thing we should also cover today is talking about the hero's journey. Hero's journey is a classic narrative. I don't know what would you describe it as? It's a narrative sort of template, isn't it? I guess.
Yeah, I guess it mainly focuses on specific character roles and how they develop that story. It's primarily based on fairy tales, really. But that's pretty much the structure that we follow with most stories. And arguably where most of the twists come from as well is where you kind of start to blur the lines between those roles.
I think for anyone listening that wants to know a lot more about the hero's journey, because we won't go over all the steps, just Google hero's journey and there's some good diagrams out there which show you what actually happens with this story. And if you were to apply it to a game or film, you can see how it applies really cleanly to it. Some good examples to apply it to that are really obvious are like Lord of the Rings, the Star Wars films. They're all very good. I also find Toy Story works quite well as well as a device for that. But yeah, take a look at it. But we'll cover some basics of the actual hero's journey. So the premise of the hero's journey is that the hero starts in a familiar state. They are at home, essentially. They're living their day-to-day life. Nothing's out of the ordinary. And that's the point where you sort of set up the world and set up the characters and so forth. And usually in a film, this is like most of the first act. Like it's a good chunk of the film. Not even the first act. It's a good chunk of the film. Like a good 20-30 minutes, I reckon. So this is like you watching Frodo in Hobbit. It's him interacting with Gandalf, them going to the fair, all that interaction. That's that setup part. That's that familiar territory. So why do we do that? Bill, do you want to elaborate why we want to start off by? Are you happy to explain that to the people?
Yeah, I guess. Start there? I guess the main point of that is to develop some kind of familiarity and start to develop kind of an understanding of that character, isn't it? It's it's a literal start to their journey. It's where you start to outline their characteristics, outline their approach to just everything in general. I guess to begin with, and I guess it starts to introduce you to the theory regarding the characters by a guy called Vladimir Prop, and it starts to introduce you to some of those key characters that then kind of push that journey onto the next the point of the call to adventure, as I say.
And as you said, the call to adventure is the next part, and the call to adventure is that inciting incident. It's the thing that is, so you're watching the ordinary and then suddenly the extraordinary happens. Something out of the ordinary happens to our main character or characters, which is the sort of the spark to the adventure, the call to adventure. And it's that point where you want the hero to decide whether or not they're going to go on that adventure or not. And it's that conflict we have inside the hero's character that is the most important part, I feel like. It's the part where that hero, that character is deciding they want to change, they want to develop, they want to be better. So for Luke in Star Wars, that inciting incident is probably him discovering the hologram message from Princess Leia to go find Obi-Wan Kenobi. And it's that moment where he's going, well, I've got to go find Obi-Wan Kenobi, but Uncle Owen needs me to do X, Y, Z things on the farm. It's him finding excuses to not go on that adventure. And until he makes that choice, and that choice is usually helped by a third party, and in this case it's R2-D2 who goes wandering off into the desert, and that kind of forces Luke to go, okay, yes, I'll go on this adventure and go find Obi-Wan Kenobi. And that sort of, it does the chain reaction of things that kicks off the adventure. In Lord of the Rings, the inciting incident will probably be them finding the ring and deciding what to do with it. And it's Frodo's decision to go off and take it to Rivendell and things like that. And we get that in games too. But the thing I find in games is that duration between the start of the game, where you're developing the world, understanding the characters, and the inciting incident is a lot shorter. It's a lot less time spent in game. Trying to think of a good example for this. So in Half-Life 2, we start off Half-Life 1. We'll do Half-Life 1 or 2. It doesn't really matter. Both do it. But so in Half-Life 1, we start the game off with Gordon Freeman on the train on his way to work. He goes into work. Everyone says hello. He gets his badge, gets his suit on, and he does his job. He goes in, and whilst you're doing this, you're hearing whispers about how this test shouldn't be going ahead because it's dangerous and so forth. And then the call to adventure happens when Gordon is exposed to this new alien threat that's invaded the Black Mesa laboratory, and now that call to adventure is pretty much it's never really a moment in it's hardly a silent protagonist, but it's that moment of the player's decision: do I want to continue this adventure? Is it interesting for me to carry on playing? Because at the moment I've just gone to work and done work things. It'd be nice to know whether or not I should carry on doing this. Can you think of any other examples, Bill, from your experience as a game player, of those sort of lull, that first moment where you are seeing normality?
Yeah, I think it was Xbox series called Blue Dragon. Where you kind of start that off, and for the longest time, it's just kind of just introducing the characters and. Mm-hmm. Like you say, kind of the calm before the storm. But I think the thing that games tend to do is that call to adventure is always kind of thrust upon the player, isn't it? It is, not necessarily a choice as such. I think it's one of the Far Cry games where actually at the start you do have that option to refuse.
Yes, that is right, yeah.
If you wait for the guy to get back, the adventure ends there.
Yeah.
Which I find quite interesting. It's something that most stories don't give you the option in.
No, I would like to see that more in games. That idea. I mean, it's a joke gimmick thing because the player's immediately going to start the game up again. But it's an interesting gimmick to say like, oh, by the way, you don't have to go on this adventure. You could just sit here and live the rest of the game. It'd be over for you in a very short while. But I think that's a really interesting thing to do. Like, I think it was Far Cry 4. Yeah, 4 did that. And yeah, I say it was really quite cool. So I'd like to see more of that. It'd be interesting to see more of that.
Yeah, I tend to get quite bored with it's kind of the typical trope that's used. I mean, I know that it's literally a framework, the hero's journey thing, but the initial kind of refusal to kind of embark, I'm not strong enough kind of.
Yeah, I'm not strong enough, not brave enough, I don't have the right equipment, whatever it may be. It's them trying to find that excuse, isn't it?
Yeah, I find it quite interesting where you have a game where straight away they kind of jump in. I mean, the Halo games, for example, you jump out, you learn the controls, you're straight in. There's no, I can't be bothered or...
Yeah, no, it is very much like that. I think the closest you get to that is the little startup where you have to point your camera at lights to check your y-axis if you want. That's literally, I think, the only quiet time they have in those games. But I say it's more common than not to have a very little, if not no, sort of normality at the start where you get to see the hero in their natural environment. Some games do. Some good examples are the Naughty Dog games. You see Drake doing his little treasure hunt. That's his normal life. That's what he does. You see Joel going out his business until he finds Ellie. It's a day-to-day for them. Granted, they're not ordinary circumstances, but for them, they are ordinary. So some games do it, and you find it's the more narrative-heavy games that show that sort of stuff, and less so for the action-orientated games. I think it's just mostly because it's a fear for developers that you're not getting the player into action straight away. And I think that all comes down to what world you're showing the player. If the world's interesting enough, you can hold their interest. Because for the character, it may be an ordinary, boring world, but if it's interesting to the player, then it won't be. So a good example of that is the Last of Us game. Like it's interesting to walk. And it is walking at a slow pace, walking through the city, looking at what's going on, looking at what the characters are doing, looking at what listening to what people are saying. It's that moment just to absorb the world you're in at the moment and go, right, okay, this is the state of affairs. Okay, and going further into a hero's journey, the main thing that we want to do is push the player and the character out of their comfort zone. So after the call to adventure, they go into sort of a stage called Belly of the Beast type stage, where they're invited to go into the most dangerous point, the enemy's lair, the dragon's cave, whatever it may be, and that's where the conflicts between them and the darker version of themselves and the temptresses and things like that are going to try and stop their journey there and then. And again, and I feel like that stage itself is quite a large portion of the game, but not necessarily always. Say all these things are come with the caveat. It's not always the case because people are always trying to develop new, interesting things with story, and all the better, I'd say.
I think that whole point of the journey is, like, say, 90% of the game. What becomes quite predictable is the point where you get to a point where you think that your character is kind of done with their journey. Either they're not strong enough to continue, or they lose a key item or something like that. Which, you know, people refer to it as the abyss moment, and you see it all the time in film. You see it all the time in, you know, literature as well. The point where the hero kind of gets to a point where they think that they can't carry on.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, I think, that, again, it's almost got to a point where you expect it to happen.
Yeah.
So, you know, at that point where in a game things start to go downhill, you're just kind of waiting for that moment that's just going to launch off the rest of the game. I played Journey recently, which was fantastic, and there's a point right at the end of the game where you're climbing the mountain, and then you just kind of collapse. And part of me was hoping that the game would just stop there, you know. But I just knew that something would happen, and something would come and rescue me, and I'd launch off into the sunset, literally launch off into the sunset. And I think that, I mean, it's not lazy. I think it's just that's what we've come to expect.
I think what's important about that particular stage itself is, and film and games are guilty of this, is we need to avoid the Deus Ex Machina effect where they're in the abyss where it's all hope is lost, and then suddenly something out of nowhere, a miracle comes out and saves them from that abyss. No one ever likes that. It should never be the case that it's the. I feel like the audience should never be surprised to see how a solution is made. What they should be surprised about, and what I would say is the better option, is when you see a character in the abyss sort of part of their journey, where it's the bottom of the hill, they're in the pit, they got to get out. You know how they got to get out, and it's usually them sacrificing something that it did to them, be it, or it could be like one of their morals, something of great loss to them, to help them get where they want to be. And this could also become a thing where they have to overcome something that they've never overcome before. I like seeing characters in tricky situations but being given all the tools they need to get out of that situation, and then the viewer and player realizing those tools are there before the character does, and when the character does see that, it's a big hit for that character. And there's one classic example I can think of that I watched in a film recently with my children. That's Inside Out. Inside Out. It's the Pixar film. With the emotions. Have you seen this?
Yeah, I still cry over the spoiler alert death of Bing Bong.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, the abyss bit is when Joy and Bing Bong, the character Bing Bong, are in the literal abyss, trying to get out before they're forgotten. And all you need to know how they're going to get out of there is right there in front of you. They've got the magic cart thing, they've got Bing Bong, and they've got Joy. And you see them try and get out, and they can't. And then the Bing Bong realizes that the only way they can get out is if he stays behind and is forgotten. And Christ Almighty, it wells me up every time I watch it, because Joy gets out, turns around and sees Bing Bong disappear into dust, gets Thanos right out of the abyss, and that's what I really like to see, is that sort of moment where the character has fundamentally changed after they've got out of the abyss. Something's really happened to them. They've learnt their lesson, they've learnt their mistakes, they've atoned for their sins, or essentially, to get out of the situation they're in. What we don't like is seeing a Deus Ex Machina come in. And another Pixar example I find for this is in Toy Story 3, when they're going to die, quote unquote die, in the furnace, and suddenly a literal machine with angelic sounds and bright white lights comes down, saves them from damnation and the fiery hell pit. It is literally a Deus Ex Machina. And it'd be different if we would set up beforehand and we'll give them information beforehand. Oh, the aliens aren't here, they were here, they've gone wandering off looking for the mythical Great Claw. I think if we had that little scene before, right at the start, when they got to this location, the aliens seeing, oh, this giant claw is doing its thing, cool, and they go wandering off on their own. If we saw that perfect, because then we would have seen, because no one believes the toys are going to die. No one goes, oh, they're going to burn, because it's a kids film for one. It'd be a really messed up way of doing it. Which, by the way, side note, did you ever see the video of the guys who edited out the saving part of that scene and cut it to credits and showed it to their mum?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that, actually. I prefer that cut. I think that cut is absolutely brilliant. That's a dark cut. That's the way that story should have ended. I mean, I just watched Toy Story 4 and I'm not happy, you know.
I've yet to watch it, so I'll hold my reservations until I see it. But
I'm saying nothing.
It's a fun bit. But it is literally a god machine comes out of the sky and saves them, and I think that you need a bit of setup. Again, the viewer needs information to see it, because the viewer likes to figure out things, and it goes with the player as well. The player wants to figure out things and wants to figure out the solution, and goes, right, okay, how are we going to do this? Blah, blah, blah. A good example I find for this is in Halo 3. Did you ever play Halo 3?
Yeah, to death for about 19 hours a day for about 2 years.
Okay, good. So you know what I'm talking about. So in Halo 3, I guess you call it a BIS moment, is that the bad guys are threatening the whole entire galaxy, and the Monitor, Guilty Spark, reveals to you that they could detonate all the rings and kill all the flood, and the player is like, well, how are we going to do that? We've got nothing to do this, and then you're reminded, like, oh, by the way, yeah, we've still got that detonation key that we picked up from the first game. We could use that, and like, well, how can we use that? Well, earlier we saw the ring we destroyed in the first game being rebuilt. That key would work on that. And you're like, hang on, right, okay, the plan is then we're going to go to that first ring, use the first key and detonate it and save the world and save the galaxy. And what I really liked about that was that it came full circle. And that's what I like about Halo 3 is it literally comes full circle in a game's called Halo. You go back to the start. You go back to where you were in the first game. But this time, rather than stopping the detonation, you're trying to start the detonation. So they've sort of flipped it. And it's a really cool flip where now the heroes are trying to do the thing that you're trying to stop in the first game. And I don't know, it really stuck with me, that ending. I thought it was a really cool ending, and then I messed it up with Halo 4 and 5. But I thought that was a perfect way to end that series. Was like, oh, by the way, you're going to do the thing you're trying to stop in the first game to save the galaxy, and I think it worked really nicely because you had the tools there. If you were a fan and played all the games, and you were given all that information, I really liked that. I thought it was a really nice moment.
What I quite like with, I was going to say what I quite like with games, just on the topic of kind of having information and then you realising it before the characters, I think is always the replayability of games. I mean, that first time you play through BioShock and, you find out about the would you kindly line, and then, I just downloaded the remastered versions. I've been playing through that. Every time he says, would you kindly?
Yeah, you notice it all the time. You're like, oh, snap, okay. And BioShock is a great series of games which really plays on the gimmicks of games and game playing, and uses those to a great narrative device, like the whole would you kindly thing. To explain to anyone who's not played BioShock, would you kindly is a phrase uttered by your narrator, essentially, and you find out in the game that's how they brainwashed you. So he'll just say that and then say a command and you go do it. And that kind of nicely plays with the whole idea in games that you do whatever the characters tell you to do. Like, give you an objective, you go do it no matter what it is, because that's the way you play games. And it's a really nice commentary on that is, oh, would you kindly go push this button, go kill this dude? And you're like, okay, I'll do that because I'm a mindless slave, because I'm a game player, that's what I do. And it goes forward as well. In BioShock Infinite, their whole idea was choice, and how there are some choices, but ultimately that there are no choices. Like, your fate is your fate, and the player throughout the game is given these random choices by the Lutece twins who are testing you, and you realise that those choices you make have no impact at all on your experience of the story in the game. The game will end the same way as you always do. The difference is that it's reinforcing that idea that choice ultimately doesn't matter. It changes the local sort of choices, but the grand scheme of thing, your fate is your fate. And it kind of plays nicely with the idea of respawning. And the whole idea, I kind of blow my students' minds with in Bioshock Infinite is that every time you die, you respawn, you're not the same Booker, you're a different Booker from a different universal timeline. We could go into Bioshock Infinite in depth and talk about its story, but we'll be here all night. Essentially, you're respawning as a different Booker, a different timeline, and you're just rejoining the fight just at that moment. So it's him, he's travelled the whole way and he's got to the same point as you did, and you're just carrying on. It's a great way of explaining the respawn mechanic in games away and saying, oh, this is why you're respawning. You're not actually respawning, you're just going to a different universe and seeing the different choices that Booker's made, which is a really nice touch. Earlier on, you mentioned the game Journey, and it brought me to a good thought. And one thing that games really do give us as game players is the whole idea of emergent storytelling. Are you familiar with this term?
It rings a bell, but I'll let you explain it.
Yeah, okay. So emergent storytelling is the idea that the players or viewers get to they make up their own stories essentially based on their own experiences, and games notably are really good at this because just for the nature of them being interactive. But Journey is a great game all about emergent storytelling. The thing that people come away from Journey with is not necessarily about their journey to a mountain, it's who they journeyed the mountain with and what happened with those people along the way. That's emergent storytelling because the player is making that story up, and they're applying new logic, new thoughts, new themes to these new characters along the way in that story. And we get in games we get two types of emergence. We get emergent gameplay and emergent story. Emergent story is those discussions that we have with other people. Like you go online, we talk. I don't know. Let's go The Witcher. Okay, so you're playing The Witcher, and you went on this big hunt, and you had to do a really cool preparation. Go to certain bad guys. Domino effect where killing one thing led to another thing, led to a fire. All these sorts of things. Like the game had a load of systems which interacted with you to enough for you to come away with a different story than everyone else. You can go back to work the next day and talk to people who played that same mission, and each of you have got different experience because you approached it in different ways. And giving the player that agency about how they conquer problems and how they develop story is a great benefit to storytelling in games. And games that do that tend to live longer in people's minds, at least, because it encourages those conversations, it encourages those discussions. This is why things like games like DayZ done so well at the start, because of this emergent storytelling. There were stories of people setting up gangs, and they were imprisoning people in like Walking Dead style in these gangs, and the game doesn't tell you to do any of this. It's just something that they decided to do, and it's that emergent storytelling which what sold that game to many people. It was those experiences that people were doing, which was really great. The most modern example I can think of is the Sea of Thieves game, a pirate game where you can be a pirate, just live life as a pirate. But the storytelling that comes out of there is from the player's point of view. The players are dictating their story, they're dictating what's going on, dictating the action. And the story emerges out of it. The other emergence is gameplay emergence, and that is where the player uses the gameplay mechanics in different ways than the developer intended. And the most famous example of this is from the game Deus Ex, the original Deus Ex. And what happened in this story was players figured out that the wall mines that you could put on the walls as one of your weapons had a hitbox on them, meaning that you can stand on them, and they use them as stepping stairs to like place them on the wall and use them as stairs to climb out of levels and get past enemies, get past encounters and so forth. So a game that was quite famous about player choice and emergent storytelling and emergent action had this new emergence where it was like, oh, players are now using this obscure technique to get out of maps and get out of environments and away from enemies and getting past barricades, and a game allows you to do that. And that was something that the game designers did not foresee, and it was a surprise for them, and something they actively encouraged and liked, because it was, after all, it was a game that was all about that sort of player agency. But it was something they didn't expect, and that emergent gameplay came out of it. And there have been other examples since then. I'm trying to think of another good example. Usually they're like big online games where people start setting up. I know a good one. World of Warcraft on the RP servers, the role-playing servers, at Goldshire, which is a town at the start of World of Warcraft as a human. They one night a week will do storytelling in the inn. So you, as your character, you can sit in the inn drinking fake virtual beer and tell stories to each other, campfire stories, and that's something obviously the game doesn't tell you to do, but it's a new thing that players just rallied around and started doing. So emergence is a really cool thing that games have quite unique to them. Maybe you get emergent storytelling from some films which have more like vague and ambiguous story moments that let audience members sort of debate and argue about what it all means and what the takeaway was from it. But it's definitely something that is unique to games and what they bring forward to the medium. So when you're designing a story, there are a few things I think you should go ahead and think about first and foremost. First of all, look at film studies in storytelling. I can't stress that enough. Like, we borrow so much from film, it's crazy. And look at how storytelling is done in film. Then I'd suggest is taking thinking about what do games have, what tools do you have in games development, in games and interactive media that you don't in film, and how can you use that to help tell those stories and how to support those stories. I don't think you're looking for a gimmick. You don't need to have a gimmick, but as long as you are supportive of the story you're telling, I feel like that's a good step forward. What other tips would you give for people that are trying to write stories for their games, Bill?
Yeah, I mean, off the back of looking at film, I think the key thing is, it's all about the development of characters, and film tends to play on the same kind of roles. So you always have your hero, you have your villain. There's usually a damsel in distress, be that a person or an object or just a goal in general. There's always a dispatcher, usually the person who's telling you where to go. It's those elements there. If you want to kind of do something new with that, it's about taking those roles and kind of reordering them, perhaps. In the world of film, I think I've watched Frozen about 86 times this past week, but every time, I look at the character of Prince Hans, and I think they've done it so well. They had this guy as the hero throughout the whole film until that one.
He sings in one of the entry songs.
Exactly.
When do you get the bad guy singing with the protagonist?
Well, this is the thing.
It's rare. You don't get that. You don't get Gaston singing with Belle or the Beast, do you? You get you. But here you have Anna and Hans just singing about love, and it was a great twist. I agree.
I think that it's playing on those tropes. So it's playing on what the audience expects. You look at that. You tend to look at it as the good-looking, smooth-skinned character is always your hero. The ugly, hairy, or dark character is always your villain. It is playing on those tropes. And there's a lot of games out there where it turns out that you're the villain, and I never get tired of that.
No, definitely not.
But then
I think games can get away with that. I feel like a lot better than films can.
Yeah,
I feel like the anti-hero works better for games than it does for film.
Yeah, it all comes down to alignment. So obviously in film it's super easy to align your audience with whatever your character's thinking, because no matter, you know, who that character is, good or bad, if you're seeing it from their point of view and seeing their justification for it, then that's when you start to see them as a hero regardless. Whereas, you know, in game where you kind of have choice in that matter, I think that's the key thing. And you know, I remember back when I was in secondary school and someone was talking to me about Fable and the fact that you can have a choice, and there was a moral barometer in that. You could be a hero or you could be a villain. I think having those small choices is key, and it's all about, I think, not playing into audience expectations. And again, it's risky. You know, films tend to stick with the same tricks because they know that it sells well.
Yeah.
Games tend to do the same as well. People get angry. You know, people give bad reviews if a game story doesn't do what they expect it to do, or if they think that twist is stupid or, you know, unnecessary. But ultimately it's sometimes that bravery pays off, you know. A lot of people that I speak to playing Last of Us, they hate the choice that Joel makes at the end. They think that it's ridiculous. It basically almost invalidates the whole game. But I like that. And I think that it really depends on the audience as well. Whenever I teach film and I talk about how audiences respond and align to certain characters or certain points in the narrative, I always say you have to think about people's actual experiences in life as well. You know, if you've got a cops and robbers game, or if you're watching a film, like a typical cops and robbers film, and you yourself are a career cat burglar, you're probably not going to watch that and think that the cops are the heroes. So it's all about, I think, giving your players choice as well.
Yeah. Carrying on with what you were saying about characters, I feel like one thing that you definitely need to make sure you have to tell a story. I think people confuse story with plot, and I feel like a good story compared to a plot is a story that has a character that develops and changes throughout and returns back to their life as a different person. They've changed. Something about them changed. Not physically, I don't mean like they've gotten stronger or anything like that, but they've changed in their morals, their ethics, their point of view, whatever it may be. Their outlook on life has changed massively, and because of their experiences. And I find the films and games I don't like are, when it comes to story, is when the character has made zero change. They've just gone on an adventure, done loads of stuff, and gone back home. They basically, what it does feel like, it feels like that was their normal life. It doesn't feel like they've made any differences or any change in themselves. So when you are designing these characters, make sure they've got an arc. And I don't mean just the main character, I mean all characters, especially the villain as well. I can't remember which film director or writer said it, but the villain, in his point of view, is doing the right thing. So with that, keep that in mind when you're designing villains. A good villain has that in mind. They think they're doing the right thing. Gaston in Beauty and the Beast thinks he's doing the right thing. He thinks he's killing this monstrous beast in a castle that is threatening the town and things like that, when he's not. He's being rash decisions about his own vanity and things like that. You want to make sure that is the case. I'm trying to think of a villain that think that he's just doing villain for villain's sakes. I think one example is Jafar in the actual cartoon Aladdin. I think they fixed it a little bit in the new Aladdin, but in the cartoon Aladdin, Jafar just wants to be the most powerful because he wants to be the most powerful. There's no rhyme or reason to it, really. They tend to try and fix that with the live action one they did. I feel like they tried to make him justify it by saying, "Oh, we've got enemies encroaching upon us. We need to show our power. We need to be more powerful and show it." So I feel like they try to justify it a little bit with the remake, the live action remake, but definitely in the cartoon, he's just bad guy for being bad guy's sakes. So definitely think about how your character's going to change. And there are some films I've seen that I've just hated because I've learnt nothing, or actually thinking about it, I would say your character has to change, or the player has to change their own point of view and things. As long as one of them changes, either the player / viewer or the characters inside the film, movie, whatever it may be, also changes. A good example of a film I watched recently that I didn't like. What was it called? Vivarium. Have you heard of this film, Bill? It's new.
No, I haven't heard that one. No.
Okay, so it's a new film with Jesse Eisenberg in it, and it's
the premise. Heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to spoil it, by the way, for anyone who hasn't watched it. Don't worry, you're not missing much. It's a new couple looking for a house. They find a house and they sort of get locked in this sort of weird location where they can't escape. There's only them. It's a loop. Everything's perfect, pristine. They can't get out. There's this weird boy character they got to raise who doesn't seem human or isn't human, and yeah, it's just them trying to figure out how to get out of this place. And spoiler alert, essentially at the end, they've had enough. She snaps and slaps the weird creature man, and he goes underneath the pavement, and she falls into it and finds alternative universes with other people locked in the same place who have like killed themselves or going mad, insane, being locked up in this weird location. And at the end, she dies. All the characters die, apart from the main bad. I guess you call it bad guy antagonist. The game basically loops back on itself. The film loops back on itself. So the way it starts is the way it ends, and no one has changed. No one has developed. I've learnt nothing new. If I'd learnt what the hell that place was and what it was doing and anything like that, it would have changed my opinion on it. I don't mind if I've learnt it. I don't care if I've learnt it and the characters haven't. That's fine, because as long as someone's grown here, even if it's me and no one else. But it was a film that was like, it got to the end, and me and my wife, we were just looking at each other like, well, all right. You get this idea of incompleteness, and you feel like you feel more confused about what you just experienced. You feel like you're just experiencing something for the sake of experiencing it. And in my research, I was looking up and trying to figure out what the hell it was. I just Googled it, like, what the hell does this film actually mean? And the director of it gave the basic cop-out of he wanted audiences to develop their own thoughts and experiences about what was they're seeing and and come up with their own ideas, which I feel like is a massive writing cop-out, in my opinion. I don't know about you, Bill, but that to me is like,
yeah,
waste.
There's quite a few films I've seen that are like that, where it comes down to audience interpretation, and generally though they're the ones that are kind of surreal or avant-garde. Like there's a film by David Lynch called The Grandmother, which I had to teach for A-level film, and when I've got students saying to me, what was that about? What was the journey? What was the point of that? And, I've got to stand there and go,
there wasn't a point.
Yeah, I don't know. She started whistling at one point, started flying around the room, and that's pretty much it,
Yeah, it's just a story for the sake of story, and I feel like no one's the better for it. I thought that was expensive. Yeah, that was an expensive piece of artwork to look at.
I felt like that at the end of Destiny, when that came out.
Destiny 1, yeah.
For the DLC, it got to the end of the story, and I was actually shocked that it ended. I wasn't expecting it. And I think there's quite a famous line from that game, isn't there, that they repeated in Destiny 2. It was kind of like a massive cop-out line. I can't remember exactly what he says. see if I can find it because it's hilarious.
Is it Wizards from the Moon or whatever it is? That line you're talking about.
I'll find
that
it.
Wizards from the Moon or something like that. I can't remember now.
It's someone's trying to explain the whole story to him basically, or explain reasoning behind something, and I think it's something along the lines of you wouldn't understand, or I don't have time to tell you, it just kind of felt like a massive cop out. But yeah, that whole story, I didn't know kind of where I went. I felt like I ran around a lot, shot a lot of things, but didn't really know what I'd learned from that.
And because you're playing a character which is a faceless, nameless character, doesn't talk. It becomes you are that character. So therefore, you are the one who's expecting to learn things. You're the one who's expecting to change and grow during it. And that clearly didn't happen in the first Destiny game. I feel like the second game does a better job at that by giving you secondary characters which you can sort of follow, and they're almost like protagonists, I guess. So I feel like the story sort of follows you a bit better in that one. It helps to have got a plot in it as well that you can follow. Yeah, I mean, I've just found the line. I don't even have time to explain why I don't have time to explain. That's it. But I think games like Mass Effect, for example, are brilliant for it. But for the multi-stranded narrative, if we're staying with characters, the fact that you build a relationship with all these characters, and I think it's in the third one that your choices kind of determine which ones live, which ones die, which ones stick with you at the end. Yeah, they kind of, which I think is brilliant, because obviously you spend most of your time focusing on one character. Games like Final Fantasy and stuff like that, where you develop a whole team, it's, that's one way of doing it. But games like that, where these are just secondary characters to your own that support you, but they're so integral to the story, and it's their development as well. And I think as well, again, it's that moral barometer, or just kind of the fact that actions have consequence. That's kind of the key premise that I think games can do that films obviously can't. I mean, outside of things like Bandersnatch and stuff like that now. You can't make a choice in a film. You can't have a moral barometer. You've got to go with what the story says. You've got to agree with the characters, because you haven't got a choice. It's the cause and effect sort of thing coming into play, isn't it? Like, this has happened because you did this or made this choice, and that comes down just moment to moment gameplay as well. It could be like these enemies have flanked you because you ignored this side of the room, for example. But in a story sense, it could be something grander, like in Mass Effect, I chose to develop all my time with you, therefore the game is naturally going to take you away from me, or something like that, because it's going to play on the heartstrings, or whatever choice it wants to do. Okay, I think that'll do for this episode of the podcast. Thank you, Bill, for your insight and experiences inside storytelling in film and games. Thank you for having me. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Yeah, I did. And hopefully everyone listening enjoyed that too, and then gained some insight into how to approach their stories. I say it is a very wide topic. There's loads of stuff you can talk about with it. But I think the main takeaway should be from this is that you should be looking at film, looking at the hero's journey, and taking the lessons learned from that and applying what is unique to games and unique to those experiences to tell better stories. And with that, we've got no emails this week, so with that, we'll end that here. The next topic for the next episode is going to be talking about the generational leap between the current console iterations to the new ones, the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. What does that mean for game developers? What kind of things do you want to look out for? And what does it mean for the industry itself? What are the technical changes going to be doing to our games? And what kind of things does it open up to us as game developers? So if you have any questions for that, you can email our show at podcast@ryanlaley.com. That is podcast@ryanlaley.com. Once again, thank you, Bill, for joining me this episode. Thank you. And I'll see you all next time. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.